welcome back for another safety hot topic. Again, I'm Sydney. This is my colleague Keenisha. Hi, Kay. I'm glad to have you today. We're going to be talking about a subject that can be really taboo. We're going to talk about that and challenging the stigma there. Mental health is a topic that we talk about in a lot of our presentations, and we do it for all ages. We do it for parents, we do it for teachers, we do it for students. So today we're really going to focus on what to look for in students and how to handle that whole subject. So June 5th was actually the 1-year anniversary of Kate Spade's suicide, and we hear about this stuff all the time in the news, and our kids are hearing about this all the time in the news. June 5th was Kate Spade. June 8th was Chef Anthony Bourdain. And I mean, Mac Miller, we lost Mac Miller last year. My husband's, the biggest, saddest one for my husband is Robin Williams. So many beloved people live with mental illnesses, and they're affecting, 1 in 5 Americans lives with a mental illness. So this is something that we need to be talking about. And it is a hard subject, but I hope that after today, this is an approachable subject. That's something that we all need to be talking about with each other, with our friends, but also with our students. So a couple quick mental health facts is mental illness is the leading cause of disability in the United States. So I don't think that people really think of mental illness as a disability, but mental illness can be crippling, physically, emotionally, life-wise, okay? So suicide amongst adults is the 10th leading cause of death, and in adolescents, it's the 2nd leading cause. So this is affecting our students, and we have to talk about it. Now, when Keenisha and I and Jenna from last week go into schools and talk about mental illness with students, suicide is a topic that they bring up oftentimes. Do you think? Yeah, if we're at all kind of trying to tread into that waters lightly, they're always like, okay, but what if someone's thinking of suicide? So it is something that we need to be talking about with them. With that said, I understand that it's such a taboo subject. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to ask our student or our friends, hey, are you thinking of suicide? Are you thinking of mental illness? Really, what I want to say here is that mental illness is simply just a sickness, just like the common cold or flu. If your child was living with the flu, you would take them to the doctor. And so we've got to start talking about it more, and we've got to suppress those feelings so that we can get them the help that they need. Mental illness is just a chemical imbalance in your brain. It can happen to anyone. If you personally and your family haven't experienced it yet, I'm sure you know someone that has.
For sure.
So I want us to challenge the stigma. I want us to talk about it. If your child was living with mental illness, how would you want your friends to treat you? Would you want them to be all scared to talk to you or bring it up? I, my whole life, have lived with anxiety, and pretty severe growing up. And I remember one of the best things for my mom is that she had great friends who were willing to talk about it with her. Because if it's happening to your student, it's scary. It's scary for you, it's scary for them, and being able to process it with your friends is so good. Okay, so really let's chat, let's dig deeper about what to look out for, what they should be doing. Okay, can you help me with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we want to make sure too that you know your students, that you're able to talk to them, keep those lines of communication open. As Sydney stated, when we go into these schools and we're talking to different students, and they're the ones that's bringing up suicide as well as self-harming behaviors, we're also noticing that students are committing suicide at younger ages, unfortunately. So, of course, as Sydney mentioned, it's a taboo subject. It's something that a lot of people don't like to talk about, but we need to because of how many students that it's affecting, not just students, but also adults. And again, that children are now being exposed to these type of behaviors, these type of symptoms of mental illness at younger and younger ages. So it's so important for us to get the word out there. And of course, to keep those lines of communication open. We have to be able to talk to our kiddos. And we shouldn't have to say that, for some parents. I know that most parents are genuinely concerned about their child's well-being, but having those conversations with them, how was their day? What are their grades like? Who are their friends? Who do they like to hang out with? And being able to understand and know what they like to do and the things they like to be engaged in, so that you can take notice when those things aren't normal. when they're not being as social as normal, or when they're not eating the type of foods they normally like to eat, or maybe you guys normally engage in conversation on the ride home, and now when they get in the car, they kind of just don't want to really talk anymore. That's being able to notice those changes in behaviors, so that of course we can start that conversation of, hey, I noticed that, for some reason you kind of just seem more down or more sad, you're not eating like you normally do, what's going on. We definitely have to be able to start that conversation, but of course noticing those changes in behaviors as well.
So you have a baseline. You got to know how they are regularly, so you know if there's a change, if something's up.
Right.
So I think that's great.
Keeping those lines of communication open. It's so important. Again, being aware of their surroundings, who they're with, who they normally hang out with, and being aware too if their friends are a good influence, I would say, because I know sometimes kids can start to hang with the wrong crowds, unfortunately. So we want to be aware of that as well, and the effects that it can have on them as well.
I think that a big piece of knowing your child is being aware of what's going on, but then also looking out for potential pitfalls. So for me, my anxiety growing up was always triggered by change. So if there's a big change in my life coming up, my mom knew that there was gonna be some spiral that probably happened, and she could help and kind of surround me with some protective factors. So some big risk factors for students, like I said, change. Any kind of relational strife, whether that's they're struggling to make friends at school, or even like a breakup of a relationship, which to adults you're like, oh my gosh, it's a middle school or high school relationship, like you'll be fine. That can really trigger a mental illness in that student. Other things like low connectedness at school, or moving to a new school, that's a huge change. Even things like medications, changes in medications can be risk factors. And I think that that's one that we don't always think of. I recently was presenting to a group of parents, and a mom raised her hand and she was like, yeah, my son, I gave him allergy medicine when allergies were so bad here. She started giving him allergy medicine, very over-the-counter kind of allergy medicine, and she was like, I started noticing changes in behaviors. And she couldn't figure out what was wrong, and then she went to look up the side effects of the medication, and it said could cause mental illness. So simple things like that, just again, know your child and look out for any potential pitfalls.
Yes.
And then when there are pitfalls, you know something's coming. Like earlier, you were telling me when you guys first moved to Houston, your husband came here first, right? Okay. So you didn't think about it at that point, but now you know that, oh, if your husband's coming here first, that could affect your daughter.
Absolutely.
So talk about that. Tell me what happened there.
Absolutely. So our daughter's 3 years old. When we first moved to Houston, this was 2 years ago, she was only 1 year old, and we didn't think that it would have any effects. And I think that sometimes we don't think of mental health effects on toddlers, on babies. But unfortunately, her not seeing her father every day because he was transitioning us to move here was really profound for her. She started to regress in potty training. She started to suck her thumb. She regressed in her language development as well. And we still actually see some effects of that to this day. And it's been 2 years later, unfortunately. So keeping that in mind too, that it doesn't have to be trauma related. It could just be a life change. That was a big deal for her that we at the time didn't think of.
Right, so now if you move again, you can think of that and do some things to kind of protect that situation and talk with her about that. Tell me about some other protective factors. What even is a protective factor? Because I feel like that's a very mental health word. Mental health term. So tell me what a protective factor is.
So a protective factor is just something that basically serves as like a buffer, so that the risk factors or the effects of a mental health issue won't be as severe. So again, it protects them from having those symptoms or having those issues that come along, that could possibly come along with a mental illness. So protective factors, for example, could be connectiveness, as Sydney mentioned, to maybe your community or to your school, being involved in maybe athletics or any type of club, or maybe if your child volunteers or something of that nature on the weekend, something that gives them a sense of purpose. A sense of pride. That could definitely be a protective factor. Communication, as we mentioned, can also be a protective factor. So again, keeping those lines of communication open, that lets your child know that, hey, like my parent is engaged, they're involved, like they know if something's wrong with me or something's going on with me, they're gonna be able to notice that. That's also a protective factor. Being able to again, just notice those changes in your child can also be a protective factor for them, so that, and it's okay to not have the right answer.
That's
it's okay
huge.
to not
Can you
know
say
what's
that
going on.
again? Say that again.
It's okay to not know if something, you want to notice it, but it's okay if you don't have the right answer. You know, like, I understand that this is, you know, going on with my child, but I don't know what to do. That's okay.
Yeah.
Because as a parent, there's no, you know, rules,
Right.
rule books when it comes to kids, right? So you want to do the best that you can, but try to reach out to someone. So if it's a counselor, or maybe a therapist, maybe at the school,
Yeah.
or something of that nature. But okay, it's okay to not have the answer.
Your job is to notice if there's something going on with
Right.
your kid, to listen non-judgmentally, and to get them the help that they need.
Right.
Because, I mean, how old were you when you had Leah?
I was 25.
25. At 25, did you have all the ansers?
I still
Do you
don't.
still have? No way. Okay,
I
so
still don't.
no matter how old you are, you're all trying to figure this out. I don't have kids yet, but I know that I will not know all of the answers. So there are mental health professionals there. There's school counselors there to help you through this process. Now, if you ever really truly feel like your child is at risk of suicide, please ask them in as plain of terms as you can, are you thinking of
Yes.
suicide? Okay?
Yes.
That can save a child's life. Oftentimes, if someone is considering suicide, somebody just reaching out and asking can save their life. Now, if they say no, and they're like, no, Mom, that was so weird, or no, Dad, why would you ask me that? Okay, that's fine. But if they admit to it, yes, and oftentimes people will admit to it, go a step further and ask them, hey, do you have a plan for this? Do you have a way of doing it? If they do, immediately get them help. Call 911 if you need. Call suicide prevention hotline, things like that. We'll link a couple helpful resources, but just because you ask that question doesn't mean that you're putting that idea in their brain. And I know you're really big on that.
Yes,
So,
yes. That's important. That's rule number one. If you think that someone is struggling, or you think that they may want to commit suicide, please ask them. As Sydney mentioned, I think that some people think that puts that idea in their head. Well, if I ask them if they're thinking about committing suicide, I'm going to make them want to do it. And that is not the case. That couldn't be further from the truth. Please ask them if you do feel that they're having those type of thoughts. I think that's also very difficult. That's a really hard conversation.
That's what I was about to say. That
That's
is like
hard.
the hardest thing I've had to ask. Like personally, professionally, I've had to ask it a few times, but personally, I've had to ask 2 of my friends that question, and it was traumatic for me. I mean, like, very hard, and we understand that, but you really can save a life. The last thing that I want to encourage you, or I don't know, just really, encourage you to do is be patient with your student. If you ask them, hey, do you think you're living with a mental illness? They're going to look at you like, I don't know. No. Even if you are trying to have those conversations, it might take them a long time to even be able to identify that there's something wrong.
Right.
Oftentimes we see anger in students because that's a pretty easy emotion to jump to. So if you're noticing anger in your student, really, like we've been saying this whole video, if you notice any kind of change, be patient with them, keep talking to them, and don't be upset if they go to somebody else, whether it's someone at school, another family member. You know, that saying, it takes a village, I 100% believe that. I really think it takes so many people, and it's good if you build that village up and your student feels like they have more than one person that they can talk to. So be thankful if they do. You know, we've just scratched the surface, right? Like, this is just the bare minimum on mental health, but really we want to encourage you to start talking about this, because like we said at the beginning, this is affecting adults and adolescents alike. I mean, it affects everybody. And so we need to have these conversations, and we need to dig deeper. If you're interested in getting involved in the mental health world, we are actually at Crime Stoppers, our mental health curriculum is called Be Nice, which I love. NICE is an acronym for Notice, Invite, Challenge, and Empower. And that's what we go out and do with students, and even with staff and adults. But we have a volunteer training coming up in August 13th, I think. Yes, August 13th. And if you want to go, and even we start talking about this with pre-Kers, pre-K kindergarten, we read them a book It's a great thing. If you are already a mental health professional and you're interested in working with middle and high school, you can also come to that training and we can train on that. But the middle and high school is just for mental health professionals. If you're anybody and you want to start challenging the stigma with us, please do. You can go to our website for more information, and as always, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, all the things. We have all the things, and we really hope that these videos are helpful.
Yes.
And just encouraging that if you are walking through this with a family member or a student, that you're not alone, and there are resources here for you. We're always here to help in any way that we can. So thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming, Kay.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.
Bye.